the Dirty Sports Podcast. I said welcome to the Dirty Sports Podcast with Andy Ruther and Joe Prano. Welcome to the Dirty Sports Podcast.
Welcome to the Dirty Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Ruther, coming to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, with my co-host from Port Hueneme, California, Joey No Chill Prano.
Hello, Andy.
Good morning.
Good.
And when I say morning, I mean MOURNING.
I mean, the Ruther curse. We've started to harness the power of the Ruther curse, and we're using it for good. Somebody gave you that O.J. Simpson jersey how long ago?
Like 4 years ago.
And you framed it when?
Well, technically, Brittany did it, and we're actually going to redo it because it's not as fresh as it should be. She finished it this weekend.
O.J. was fighting for his life the second you put that thing into the frame. Basically, we have started to harness the power. Now, I just want to say, apologies or condolences to you. I know you're one of the world's biggest OJ fans, and I'm sure this loss cuts deep.
It does. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. Cuts very deep. Like a kitchen knife deep, That's how deep it cuts. OJ's gone? He's gone.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
No matter what happens for the rest of time when in referencing O.J. Simpson, I'm just adding allegedly. Funeral services will be held for O.J. at the Brentwood Country Club next Tuesday. Allegedly.
If the casket does not fit, you must have quit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be great. That would be great if they if wherever they bury O.J., they make the hole for the casket like just barely the right size, so they've got to like squeeze it down.
It's crazy though. It's look, he was 76, and we all know
a long life for a guy with CTE.
Yeah, a guy with CTE, a guy who murdered people, guy who then went to jail.
Allegedly.
We're
not gonna, talk badly about the dead.
Do you have to say allegedly now that he's dead?
I don't know. Andy, I just posted a TikTok and I said this. It's like all jokes aside, before we go too hard at OJ, I think people should remember that whatever he did allegedly or did not do, OJ was a parent. There are people out there today who have just lost their father. And what I'm saying is I hope Khloe Kardashian is hanging in there.
Yeah. Thoughts and prayers to Khloe.
Thoughts and prayers to Khloe. Rough day. First she loses her fake dad. Then she loses her stepdad. Now she's lost her real dad. I mean, the trifecta of father losses for Khloe. You talk about, they say girls have daddy issues. Khloe, man. Khloe goes through daddies like I go through Miller Lite on a Friday night.
Yeah. It's a tough scene for Khloe today. It's a real tough scene. And it's a tough scene for your brother's neighbor who is
who is out to get the OJ the Simpson family. Although I guess, theoretically based on that note, the real killer could still be out there.
So you know what I got to do? So I just thought of this. So I have the O.J. Simpson jersey, which is now in a frame. Shout out to Emiliano who sent that. No lie, like 4 years ago. It's an official.
My neighbor, Emiliano.
Yeah?
Yeah, he lives up here. Did
you know
that?
I didn't know that.
I think he lives in Ventura, something like that.
So he sent that again like 4 years ago. It is ironic that I just get around to putting it in a frame and then OJ dies. But I also have, and I should fly this. I don't have a flagpole. I need to get a flagpole. I have that flag that a dirtball gave me. It says the juice is loose. I should fly to half staff this week.
Yeah. I like when you say half staff. I think most people say half-mast, right? You say half-staff, like it's a barely chubbed boner.
It's half staffed and half mast.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's both.
What? Are you sure?
I don't know. That's what I thought.
I've seen both.
Okay.
I see flag at half mast and flag at half staff. Interesting. Well, regardless, that
one of those phrases for every person that OJ killed, allegedly.
So I really should fly those to honor OJ. It'd be the appropriate thing to do.
Now they're saying OJ died of cancer, but
Yeah.
I will not rest until the real killer is found.
Dude, you're on a roll.
It's unbelievable. You know, I've never seen like Henry Kissinger died and not as many people danced on his grave. Henry Kissinger's a fucking multi-million person murdering war criminal. Everybody's like, hey, listen, he's got family out there. OJ killed 2 people 30 years ago, and the whole world's like, rest in piss, juice.
Well, it's a shame that Norm Macdonald's not around.
Oh my god. Oh my god. I posted that on my Twitter. Did you see it? I posted a clip. I reposted somebody 10 minutes of Norm Macdonald shitting on OJ.
It's funny that the repost that I did of 2019 of Norm's Heisman presentation that I posted on Dirty Sports Twitter is getting traction again.
Nice.
I'm looking right now.
Nice. That's the one from the ESPYs?
Yeah, when he hosted the ESPYs.
Such a great joke.
Yeah. It's crazy though, man. I feel like OJ turned into such a character, you forgot he was old. Right? Because the post-jail OJ Twitter just became such a weird, funny caricature.
Yeah.
That you're like, okay, this is an old dude with CTE. You forget he's gonna die. Like, you know, like you forget how old he was. And
everything about this is amazing. The comedy never stops.
It never stops.
I mean, it's the day OJ died is the day the Masters started. You talk about middle-aged white people. This is like a fucking national holiday for them. This is the greatest. Finally, justice. Now take me live to Augusta.
Well, you and I have talked about it so many times. Again, I don't think younger dirtballs, unless you lived it, the OJ trial literally overtook our entire country. And I've said this.
The trial, what about how about the fucking everything leading up to the trial? I was just thinking 1994 is the Knicks finals. We're 30 years. 30 years later, the Knicks will return to the NBA finals uninterrupted. No car chase this time unless somebody runs off with the fucking casket.
I used to watch the court. Think about this. I'm an 8th grader, summer of 94. I am going into the 8th grade. I used to watch during the summer. Guys, this is how big a deal it was. As an 8th grader, I'd be watching the court case. I didn't know anything about law. I didn't know anything about any of that stuff, the judicial system. I was fascinated reading the newspaper articles, the hard newspaper, right? This is pre-internet. I mean, the OJ thing literally overtook everybody. And I know I've said this so many times. They wheeled out TVs in my grade school.
Oh, yeah. I just
for the verdict. They reeled out TVs for the verdict.
I was obsessed with I thought I was going to be I was like, I learned about the law that summer. I just sent you this. This is something my mom was like, you're so obsessed with this. She was like at Barnes and Noble or something like that. And she got me this fake OJ's legal pad. It was like a comedy bit that was supposed to be like OJ. It looked like a legal pad and it was just like OJ's drawings and stuff. And it was like, a scribbled picture of Judge Ito with like knives going into it and stuff.
That's hilarious.
O.J. Simpson's legal pad. What's really going on in O.J. Simpson's mind as he watches the court case?
He was always scribbling on that legal pad.
Yeah.
That's funny. I didn't know this existed.
It's so funny.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, we'll never, I know I've said this, but we'll never see anything like this. Again, where there's the ex-player, the racial stuff that was a huge component of it, the LAPD, the prosecuting attorneys, there's just OJ's lawyers, there were so many storylines. It's the whole thing's insane.
It's crazy.
You know, as a kid, obviously OJ played before me. So as a kid, all I knew OJ from was the NBC sideline reporter back when the NFL was on NBC during Sundays, and then Naked Gun.
Yep. And the Hertz commercials.
The Hertz commercials where
OJ with a sack full of bloody clothes is spinning off of people trying to get his flight to Chicago. Stiff arming fucking people at the airport. We got to remake that commercial, by the way.
Oh yeah.
It was after OJ's career. We need to do it with like Marshawn Lynch, where he just like beast modes some people, just like a family of 6 in their like Disneyland stuff. Beast mode just drags them all to the gate.
So we got a lot going on this show.
We got a lot going on this show. It was a crazy day for OJ to get dropped on us. We already had a full show.
Yeah, so we have a guest coming on in about 12 minutes. Ethan Strauss.
Very, very well-known NBA writer, turned massive Substacker. Our first guest from the Substack community.
He's got a very, very popular podcast, House of Strauss. So Ethan, he covered the Warriors for years. He worked for ESPN, The Athletic, and we're excited to have him on to talk some NBA. And obviously, OJ dies. We're like, wow, this is a lot.
I have my list of top 10 running back murderers that I watched play. So OJ doesn't make that list, unfortunately.
His final 2 tweets are wild. Now that we have them, I'm gonna play them. Right, OJ's final 2 tweets, and it makes sense because he stopped tweeting February 11th.
Yeah,
you know, OJ was a very prolific murderer, a prolific running back, and a prolific tweeter. Very prolific tweeter. So OJ parodied in early February. He parodied Allen Iverson's practice.
Right, because OJ is, I mean, the king as a guy who starred in the Naked Gun movies, just a king of parody.
So this comes out in early February. I guess the rumors had leaked that he had cancer, and the rumors were that he was in hospice. So OJ put this out on Twitter.
Hey, X-World, hospice? Hospice? You talking about hospice? No, I'm not in any hospice. I don't know who put that out there, but whoever put that out there, I guess is like the Donald say, can't trust the media. In any event, I'm hosting a ton of friends for the Super Bowl here in Las Vegas, and all is well, you know? So, hey, guys, take care. Have a good Super Bowl weekend.
I mean, I don't want to say that OJ was eventually killed by his ego, but stiff-arming your way out of hospice so that you can get in your car and do a Allen Iverson parody only to die, like, not that long after. Should have stayed in hospice, OJ.
It's insane.
The news broke, OJ, the news broke that you're in hospice. Well, I need to set the record straight. And the hospice nurse is like, sir, I can't let you leave. You're in no condition to leave. He's like, you don't want to know what happens to women who tell me what to do. She's like, all right, fine. You can go. Just go in your car, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, he like recorded that outside of the building where he's staying. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy? Again,
I love that no matter what, he didn't just start with hospice. We're talking about hospice. He didn't just start. He had to get his, what's up, Twitter world?
Hello,
Uncle
Twitter world.
Orenthal.
I think it's fascinating to me that OJ like got off on that again, the caricature of
Yeah.
himself, and where he's always got to be the happy, jovial uncle.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you're a murderer.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
You know what I'm saying? Like he played into that on Twitter, and it's so bizarre to me, but also pure comedy that he's the jovial, fun old dude. Like, no, dude, you're a murderer.
Yeah.
And then this was his final post about a week later after the one I just showed about the Super Bowl, his Super Bowl prediction.
Hey, X-World, it's me, yours truly. Boy, what a beautiful day it is here in Las Vegas. Even though the game is indoors, it wouldn't have mattered, but still, it's nice to have a beautiful day like this. Hey, let me take a moment to say thank you to all the people who've reached out to me. My health is good. I mean, obviously, I'm dealing with some issues, but hey, I think I'm just about over it. Now, it mattered, but still.
So hold on. This is what I love. Even till his deathbed, OJ was lying.
Yeah.
Like even to his deathbed, he was lying. It's insane.
Obviously, I'm dealing with some issues, but I expect to be here at least 1.5 more months. And you're like, what? Why would you say that?
Nice to have a beautiful day like this. Hey, let me take a moment to say thank you to all the people who've reached out to me. My health is good. I mean, obviously, I'm dealing with some issues, but hey, I think I'm just about over it, and I'll be back on that golf course hopefully in a couple of weeks. But it was very nice hearing from you and hearing those good, positive words.
Who are these people,
Thank you.
OJ?
Now, as far as the game goes, obviously, my prediction, and it's not hope, I'm basing it on who's on the field. I see a 24-20 win by the 49ers.
Okay. One last L.
As I said, that's not hope. I'm basing that on the quality of the players that are on the football field. So, who's going to be MVP? Purdy.
Brody.
Of course, if KC wins, it'll probably be
Brody.
Mahomes. But I'm predicting number 19. And I'm not talking about Johnny Unitas. In any event, well, we got a few
So
more hours.
funny,
and
isn't it,
we'll
OJ?
know. Please, I hope you with friends, the ones who are not going to the game, and hey, it should be a great game because all the great players that are involved. Hey, God bless, take care, and I hope your team win if your team is the 49ers. God bless, take care.
By the way, you hear the police sirens showing up at the end? That had all kinds of background sounds that were very OJ. It sounded like somebody was hitting into a golf sim in the background. The police had arrived. Oh, well, here's my ride. I'm getting a police escort to the game.
Do you think
everywhere I go, you ever notice everywhere OJ goes, the police is following, just a whole police escort going to the game with my friend AC.
I feel like somebody like it was an issue. They're like, you got to stop doing Twitter videos.
Yeah.
Somebody said, you got to stop, man. Also,
his right arm completely motionless, except for the itchy trigger finger he had during that thing. But like, I'm worried. Does he have? If in the end, did he have like an issue with his good stabbing arm? It's tough. I like that Patrick Mahomes came to the Super Bowl and just decapitated his Super Bowl predictions. Patrick Mahomes was like, Niners not winning. Prody's not winning MVP.
Prody. You know what they should do? So OJ infamously was in a fantasy league, which we always talked about. Who was in that league? They have to do like an in memoriam OJ. The winner every year gets a silver knife.
Yeah.
Like they have to honor OJ appropriately. You think LA is going to shut down for his service just like they did for Michael Jackson?
Yeah. Where do you think OJ gets where's OJ's final resting place? You think
Hooters?
You think he's in LA? You think he's in Vegas? He's like a Vegas, Florida, California guy.
It's a good question. I don't know.
There's no way he's like buried next to his wife, right? That's not a thing.
Bro. He literally.
I'm just saying he denied it to the end.
He wrote a book, If I Did It,
Yeah.
which basically said he did it.
Yeah.
I guess we're never going to get my OJ
I mean-
podcast.
I mean, the CTE Hall of Fame. He's first ballot. Like, is he the original? He's like Babe Ruth going into the Hall of Fame.
He's the
It's like
GOAT.
we opened the door to the CTE Hall of Fame. It's the Aaron Hernandez and the Antonio Browns and all the people that come behind him.
Oh yeah,
But
OJ's the GOAT. He's the GOAT.
OJ ran over a couple people at the goal line to open the doors.
Yeah, OJ's the GOAT of the CTE Hall of Fame. I'm just shocked. Again, I always thought he would start a podcast. That was always my prediction when he got out of jail. That he wouldn't, he would go into that. Poor, again, just the trying to act so happy. Like, bro, you're dying. Just like,
Yeah.
I don't know, be like, hey, I'm dying. Like, that was your chance, Juice. You'd be like, I'm dying. I committed murders. It was a terrible thing.
Oh, can somebody that's a hacker get into OJ's Twitter drafts? Hello, Twitter world. One final one. I did it. Like, no, the unpublished drafts.
The unpublished drafts. Man. You know who broke the news to me?
Who?
Kyle Aronofsky.
Wow. So many dirtballs. You're the first person they thought of when they saw the news.
He texted me.
Sorry for your loss.
He said, you were the first person I thought of. Throw out the rundown for the pod today. It's going to be an OJ special episode.
OJ Bonanza.
And look, guys, I would like to donate or dedicate a lot of time to this, but Ethan Strauss is coming on here soon. I'm sure he'll have something to say about the Juice.
We got to get his thoughts.
Again, it's just that arc of a life. There's, what could you ever compare it to? Who's another person you can, there's no comps.
What are we even talking about here?
There's nothing.
No.
I'm fascinated, as we all know, by Aaron Hernandez, that he was a football player and also a multiple-time murderer.
But
OJ,
he wasn't a movie star.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. He wasn't he
A
wasn't
TV
a cultural mainstay.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. There's just so many components with OJ that we're just, it'd be like if Antonio Brown started doing movies and then also became the Sunday Night Football sideline reporter and then eventually killed 2 people.
Yeah. Allegedly.
You should have your brother put flowers over OJ's kid's his apartment
Door.
front door.
That's funny.
Right? Like, I don't know. It's nuts, though. I do want to know where he's going to be buried.
Somewhere Judge Lancito's like, we got him.
That's what I'm saying. I knew the judge, man. Like,
yeah,
I couldn't tell you besides like a Judge Judy.
Or framing OJ.
That's the only judge I could tell you.
Yeah.
My whole life. I don't know. It's crazy. I mean, I'd love to talk OJ all day. We all know I have a jersey up right now. But
Ethan doesn't know what kind of podcast he's walking in. He's like, these guys want to talk NBA? He's like previewing the show. Oh, just a half-hour OJ jokes?
You were on fire with some of those jokes. Did you script those out?
I mean, I scripted a couple. I had a few that I thought about. Like the thing is, the world moves so fast today. Like I put up the Khloe Kardashian thing because I had thought a couple of other jokes like the ones I did. And, you get out there and you get on Twitter and you're like, somebody beat me to it. I got up at 8:45 today. 3 of the first 5 jokes that I had thought of were somebody had already tweeted them or posted them. So I was like, all right, I guess my angle is the Khloe Kardashian angle this morning. But the rest of them, I figured, I thought of them. I may as well fire them off here.
That's funny. Well, I see Ethan sitting in the queue.
Here we go.
Let's talk some basketball. So we're very happy to have Ethan Strauss on the show today. So let's bring him on in.
We can talk OJ, guys. We can go wherever
go.
you want to go. Wherever you want to go, we can go there.
Welcome to the show, Ethan.
Welcome, Ethan. I knew you would be down to talk a little OJ.
I mean, it's fascinating. The whole thing, the whole saga. I mean, not that he died. That part, I would say, expected that happens to somebody eventually. But yeah, I'm fascinated by him. I'd recommend Chuck Klosterman's book, The 1990s. One of the most entertaining books I've ever read about the decade, of course, and all these events in it. And it's really done from the perspective, not of us looking back on it, because when you look back on something, you've got new information about what became relevant later on, and that informs how you look at it. He looks at it relentlessly from what it was like back then. And OJ was this real turning point where everything kind of became fodder for entertainment and comedy. Even something as horrible as a guy effectively decapitating his wife and another individual. Allegedly. I mean, I don't think OJ is going to sue us. I don't think we have to worry about that right now. And it all became part of this celebutainment spectacle in a way that really had no precedent and felt dirty and trashy, but also kind of never went away. And he's always been in this strange liminal zone where he is shamed and he is not to be part of acceptable society, but we're also kind of enjoying that it's dirty and bad to have him around. We're laughing when he would say, "Good morning, Twitter world," and he would give his football takes. And so I don't know if anybody ever really existed in the zone that he existed in as a celebrity, and he represented a real demarcation point, and I think still does to this day to an extent. So yeah, there are a lot of interesting aspects to the OJ saga.
You mentioned OJ's Twitter, his football picks that he would put on Twitter, and I was always like, man, OJ, he might be a murderer, he might have CTE, but the man played football and he probably knows the NFL. So I used to put OJ's Twitter picks, into some parlays. That guy killed many a parlays. That guy murdered. He would stab my parlays to death with his picks.
The worst thing he did.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, it's and you hit it, Ethan. It's like at times you're like, man, because I have been obsessed. And again, he's murder. It's like I've been obsessed because it's so fascinating. But then I'm like, am I wrong at times just to laugh about? I mean, what he's become and what he was. But you're like, how can I not?
Yeah, we don't give him credit for never murdering again. It's good that he quit.
Yeah.
I don't think we give enough credit for him stopping right there.
He retired from the game early in the NFL. He retired from the murdering game. He was big on leaving at the peak of his game.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
Not enough athletes do that.
It's hard not to joke about it, but at the same time, when you see Goldman's family and you go, oh my God, I mean, just this isn't a joke to them. And they get to watch us all kind of tee-hee-hee about the whole thing. So there's something particular to it where it's tragic, comic, and we're all again in this weird zone with it of it's funny, but it's horrific. And he is to be banished from polite society, but also maybe not a little bit. And the craziest thing, maybe about this, is that I'm trying to remember if it was NBC or CBS. Some network had a pilot that they had done with O.J. Simpson where he is portraying a character who is doing something with a knife. And this was filmed shortly before what happened. And it was used as this point of leverage by the network to not mess with that time slot. And so whenever some new show might launch that was about to compete with that great time slot the network had, they would float that maybe we'll just run the OJ thing against it and yes, kill your show. You are not going to be able to have any kind of launch. It's going to be drowned out by that. So in a way, he represents.
If it weren't for CBS's OJ pilot, Friends might have been a show that aired at 9:00 on Thursday.
I'm trying to remember. Can somebody look up who had the secret OJ pilot that they would just dangle and use to scare off anybody? I mean, what a cynical use.
Feels
of
like
the
the
murder.
CW, but
I think it was one of the big boys. I just don't want to say it because I don't. I want to make sure that I'm quoting it correctly because that is something that existed. I'm not just making up some rumor. But maybe somebody can look that one up because I found that to be a fascinating externality of the whole OJ thing.
Well, see, we've kind of been in just our show. We've had some weird things in the OJ world, right? I mean, so Joe's brother lives by OJ's son in Marina Del Rey. So we have that. And
got a note that they were investigating the son as part of the thing. Maybe the son was part of it, and then he had to take out his dad before he talked. This is getting suspicious.
And then we've also had David Zucker from who created the Naked Guns. We've had him on a couple times, and it's like, how did we get which is of course all I want to know. I'm like, well, how did you cast OJ? It's like, and then all this plays
Against
out.
His will is the answer.
Yeah, it's just wild. And something I noticed real quick, and then we'll move on past OJ. He always has.
Ethan didn't know what he was doing when he's like, "No, we can keep talking OJ," and he's like, "Great,
I just on to talk basketball." No, I'm just looking. the shelved OJ pilot was called Frogmen. It has been kept locked in vaults at Warner Brothers. Few have seen the final product, including many of those involved. It was filmed in 1994, and recently a source near the project allowed the Times to view a 25-minute presentation tape assembled at Warner Brothers. In 1994, it was used as a sales tool for convincing NBC executives to order the series. And yeah, I think that was the thing that NBC would dangle to make sure you wouldn't mess with. Maybe it was their Friends time slot.
Yeah.
Whatever the most valuable time slot was, they would dangle this program of OJ doing OJ things. What a crazy world to inhabit, this Hollywood world. Unbelievable. And the buzz was, as I'm reading this article on it in the LA Times, do you realize we're sitting on a 60 share, said one executive with ties to the production. Yeah, I guess it would have been a 60 share to unveil the secret OJ tape. But yeah, they used it kind of in the way that the NBA would use the potential of moving your team to Seattle if you don't give them a stadium. Right. That's what this was. That's what the Frogmen was. So there you go.
There's our segue right into the NBA.
Okay, here's a great segue. Here's a follow-up to that. What do you think, Ethan, happens first? The OJ sitcom that gets leaked, or we get a team in Seattle for the NBA?
I would say the team in Seattle, because there's just no obvious benefit to whoever leaks maybe you could leak the Frogmen to TMZ, but it seems like few enough executives have access to that. And I kind of wonder if the interest in OJ is almost fading out with our generation and people older than we are. So the Seattle, that just makes sense. It makes sense to have a team in Seattle. It's crazy not to. It's just leaving money on the table, and I don't think it's worth scaring these cities. Yeah, I'll go Seattle. Seattle over OJ.
I like it. I tend to agree. Do you think Seattle will get a franchise in the next? Because the NBA is probably going to expand, right, in the next 7-8 years. You think?
Yeah, I mean, they're such a logical place. It's been a while since they left, so maybe these things, they can take some amount of time. But yeah, I would think in the next 10, I would probably say yes, and in the next 15, I'd be pretty confident. I know there's a whole crew of people who want to move into that situation. I know Brent Barry would love to be the GM of the renewed Seattle Supersonics. So yeah, let's be optimists. Let's be optimists and say, I think it'll happen in the next 10 years.
Well, Ethan, we're so happy to have you on the show. We are a recent, our podcast recently moved over to Substack. And when we came over, the good folks at Substack just kept bringing up your name, your page, your podcast is like, the sports is happening over here. And you were one of the faces of sports on Substack. Your House of Strauss newsletter and podcast is one of the faces again of sports. How long have you been doing your stuff over here, and what made you move over to Substack?
Yeah, I think I've been doing it since fall of 2021. I got really burnt out on doing NBA coverage during the pandemic. That was a huge part of it. I'd covered the Warriors, so I mean, it's just easy to get burnt out covering the Warriors. It's funny though, because people think that it's the greatest job. I was at a practice actually, and I was bleary-eyed along with another beat reporter, and Michael Lewis was there, the great Michael Lewis who wrote Moneyball, and he is just wide-eyed watching Steph Curry do a shooting routine, and he is just grinning ear to ear, shaking his head, and he said, "Man, you've got the best job in the world." And he walked away, and I looked at my friend and we went, kind of rather be Michael Lewis. I mean, the reality of the NBA, the reality of covering it is sort of different from this job that everybody, when you see friends at a wedding, they go, "Oh my God, I want to have this. This is incredible." And aspects of it were, I want to be clear. I mean, aspects of it were truly incredible, but the NBA is a grind. I mean, it's an 82 game season, and then you've got the playoff run, and you're just on the road constantly. And so I think I was just kind of burnt out, and it felt like it was a very hysterical time around that time in the pandemic. It felt like you go on Twitter, you instantly know that everybody's freaking out about something, and you don't know if you're supposed to just do your job and talk normally, or if you're supposed to avoid certain topics. And the whole thing just got very tiring. I didn't want to feel constrained. So I wanted to talk about other things. I wanted to talk about things in the culture. I didn't want to make problems for my bosses, who were very nice to me. And so I called up the CEO, the co-founder, and I just asked out of my contract and set up shop at Substack, which gave me a little pro deal, get started. And it's just been going well ever since. I just try to talk about whatever is interesting to me. I'm just looking for that overlap between what I'm interested in and what my customers are interested in. I can't talk about everything I'm interested in. I can't talk about my son and how he, relates to my father, for an hour. That's not going to be interesting to them. But I try to find things.
Funny you should say that, because when we came over to Substack, we did over 1,000 episodes of a free show on all the platforms, and we're going over there, and people were like, "I'm not coming over to hear Andy talk about his kids," and you're like, "Okay."
I hate it.
Yeah,
yeah,
but
I don't want to hear that.
When it was free, they loved it. Now they have to pay for it. Absolutely
Yeah, they'll do it for free, but maybe not. I mean, look, I never know what they want. That's the thing. I never know what you people want. It's very hard to figure it out. So here's what I do know, though. I was becoming less interested in what I was doing at The Athletic. And when I'm interested in something, I've got a shot at making you interested in it. But if I'm not interested in something, I'm drawn dead at the poker table. There's no shot. I'm not going to be able to do it. So maybe whatever I'm interested in this week is not going to overlap, but I at least know I have a shot at it. And that's the idea behind my Substack. And the other idea is just saying things that people are saying in media behind the scenes, but actually saying it in front of God and everybody. And that's the other market inefficiency that perhaps I target.
Well, we'd love to talk. You got away from talking only NBA, but you still are one of the big voices in the NBA blogosphere. You're probably famously one of Kevin Durant's blog boys, as he attacked social media back in the day. I have some NBA questions for you as a guy who is a New York Knicks fan. Explain to me, as somebody who talks to other NBA media members with some regularity, why is Jalen Brunson being disrespected in this all NBA MVP season that he's having? It seems like no one's considering him for any of those things, at least not first team all NBA, and certainly doesn't seem to be in the MVP conversation.
So where was Jalen Brunson drafted? Not the location. I know what team he was drafted by, but what was the draft position? I legitimately don't remember.
I think
Second
he
round,
was second round, maybe I want to say 43rd overall.
Okay. So there, right there, you've got a prior right there. Now, it would appear that the Dallas Mavericks did not expect him to become a star, let alone a superstar. So you've got that in addition. He doesn't look like a superstar. He's not some high-flying athlete. He does it with craft and cunning and change of pace. I love that clip of him tricking the defender and sort of making the defender fall asleep before gunning it. Maybe you know what I'm referring to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he does it with craft. He does it with guile. I think we have a huge problem with accepting that a guy is doing what he's doing when we didn't expect it. When we didn't expect it, when it was not foretold, when you're drafted late, when you don't look like a superhero, it's hard for people to just accept that you are doing what you're doing. And this goes for not just the NBA, it goes across sports. It's something that I have seen right now, and I'm seeing in progress in the Bay Area with Brock Purdy, where he was the last pick of the draft.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the conversation about him is very much informed by the sense of he's not actually doing what he's doing. There's no way he's doing what he's doing. Kyle Shanahan's a genius. Well, why is Kyle Shanahan a genius? What's the genius thing that Kyle Shanahan does? Well, I don't know, but Kyle Shanahan's a genius, and he's surrounded by just this incredible talent. And like, well, do any of the guys he's surrounded by, are they worth any of them worth a first round pick as the 49ers are, looking to trade them? Well, no, of course not. I don't want Debo. I don't think Ayuk. I think Ayuk's good, but I don't, thirst for my team to have him. It's like, okay, well, I don't want to get too much of the football analysis here, but I do see this. I do see this happen. This isn't just a Jalen Brunson situation. It's an overall situation where when we don't expect you to be the guy, we're going to think it's a trick. And I'm really more somebody who, in general, is what you see is what you get. With quarterbacks, typically, we talk a lot about their surrounding talent, but there's not a lot of historical evidence to suggest that their production is that dependent on that talent. Generally, when you take a guy or two away from a QB, they produce the same statistically. So I think
certainly the elite QBs for sure.
Certainly the elite QBs. So I'm more of a what you see is what you get. And also with the QBs, we probably have about one guy a decade who will become remarkably better in a different situation. Everybody else, it's just you are who you are. We get one Geno Smith a decade. We get one Rich Gannon a decade. This doesn't happen very often where your situation determines your value. But we look to that explanation across the sports when we didn't expect you to become who you are. And that's where we're at with Jalen Brunson. We went into it not thinking he would ever be a superstar. He was drafted late. Nobody promised this. And so it's just going to be a different situation when assessing him versus an Anthony Edwards. That's just how it is.
So I very much agree with you. But at the same time, I think somebody that checks all of those boxes is Jokic. And so I guess
it took a while.
Yeah.
Took a while.
I guess my question for you is this, is this just a matter of Jalen Brunson doing this for a number of years and then probably in the third season where he should be getting an MVP votes, he eventually does the same way it happened with Jokic?
Yeah, you just have to do it for longer for people to believe in it. With Jokic, it took a while. He had to win the championship. People were calling him the worst MVP winner of all time. And now you've seen this rapid shift where it's accepted that Jokic is actually doing what he's actually doing. That is now accepted as the
so
truth.
Funny how fast it happens too. Yeah, from the worst MVP winner ever to people talking about his place in the pantheon of great big men of all time.
Yeah, is he going to be the greatest of all time now? And it's totally shifted. It's totally swung. And yeah, you got to legitimize yourself, and then it will eventually flip. You just got to do it for longer.
So as someone who covered the Warriors, I would ask, because we've talked about this in depth on our show. You talk about where people go and might not matter as much, or it can matter. I want to bring up Draymond Green. Because I think, Joe, right, we've been in agreement for the most part that placement on those Warriors teams and his role fits so nicely. It's like, where is Draymond's career if he goes to Charlotte, or just pick any team? You know what I'm saying? So and I guess it is taking a ding at, or a dig, so to speak, at his career. But it's like, I know he was a big part of those championship runs, and every team needs a guy like that. But just as an individual, where is Draymond Green on just, team A or team B?
Yeah.
Well, I think Draymond is to a degree a victim of what we might call draftism as well, where he's a second rounder, and people do this thing when assessing his career of what if he was drafted somewhere different. He's also the victim of another bias, and it's his own fault, which is just acting unlikably is going to cause people to look for reasons to dismiss the good things that you do. That's just life.
Like OJ was really good at the Naked Guns.
Yeah.
Oh,
I thought you were going to say on the Bills, which both are true. Both are true. But with Draymond, I've heard people do that. Like, oh my God, what if he was drafted by Detroit? What if he was drafted by Charlotte? And here's what I would say when we talk about fit. There was no red carpet rolled out for Draymond Green. I was there. He did not have much of a shot to have a role in that team. He grabbed it. He wrenched it away with his two hands, and the way he would wrench steals away. He would do two-handed steals. Not as much these days, but he was a monster defensively. He was undeniably good. They had to impart. It wasn't a matter of fitting him into the Steph Curry situation. He built that role for himself. He outplayed Harrison Barnes. He played himself into this revolutionary small ball four who could switch onto everybody and guard Chris Paul while also being able to guard the opposing team's center night after night. And I think not only is in some ways his value diminished because of where he was drafted, because he does unlikable things that make people look for a reason to dismiss him. But it's this other bias we have, which is defense is half the game. It is half the game. It is by definition half the game. Now, you could argue that on an individual level, an individual offensive player is more valuable than an individual great defensive player. I think there is data to support that. That's an argument you can make. But collectively, it's half. He is the best defensive player of his generation. He's a legitimately great player. And if he had been drafted to a team that wasn't as good, I believe he would have carved out a role and been excellent. Does he find his way to a Warriors type situation? Obviously, we don't know that. I can't do the counterfactual. I can't replay his career somewhere else. It's possible Klay Thompson gets drafted by the Hornets, and then he's just the guy we say, hey, he can really shoot it, like Allen Houston and a few other guys, but we're not going to necessarily give you a Hall of Fame bid off of it. So situation matters to a certain extent for everybody and how you're going to be historically viewed. But he's just a great player, and he is continued to be. I mean, it was assumed that Klay would have a longer prime than Draymond. That has not been the case. So I totally get why people might want to dismiss Draymond. I'm just somebody, and I had run-ins with him where he was yelling at me, and it was very much like the Kevin Durant situation. But I am very much on the side of people don't even know how good he is versus, man, it was the situation.
Well, I think you bring up the defensive part of the game and defense being half of it. And it does feel like those players that the Ron Artest, I mean, a great kind of comp to Draymond in that a lot of the on-court antics when it came to referees. Obviously, you got the malice of the palace, but like an unbelievable, a generational defensive player. But I'm not sure Ron Artest's Meta World Peace, whatever. I don't know what he goes by these days. I don't know if his legacy is the same. Does he not end up on a team in LA that goes and wins championships? And also, no one speaks of him as if, oh, this guy's a lock Hall of Famer one day, which I feel like we get with Draymond because of the championships.
Well, and the tricky thing with great defensive players, it seems like it's a personality type where they're hard drinking, jittery, twitchy maniacs. And Dennis Rodman is an obvious example. Ron Artest is an obvious example. Draymond Green is an obvious example. So it's a type, for whatever reason, that burns bright and creates some issues and might not have the longevity, might be somebody who is just very difficult. And that's going to confound our sense of where you are and what your value is. But I think that we're reluctant to admit that, again, defense is half the game. We act like it's 10%, or we go like, oh, well, like maybe he wasn't the best defender. And to be clear, there's a lot of nuance here. A point guard, I don't think, has a majority of his responsibility as defensive. Guys who are closer to the rim, it matters more. It matters more. If you're a terrible defensive big man, that matters more. I don't think Jokic is, by the way. I think he's actually a very underrated defensive player. Very smart. He blows up the opposing team's plays. But yeah, it's half the game. We don't want to admit that it's half the game. We've got a weird bias.
And it does feel like, it does feel like if you're just an offensive player, you can be on a franchise that isn't going anywhere, and they're like, we'll keep this guy because he still put butts in seats. No one's coming to watch a team lose with an elite defender out there, which is why it feels like those guys become more valuable as pieces that you can move. Hey, what you're missing is this great defensive player that we have, and what are we going to do with him? Steals don't pay the bills. Yeah,
it's just not. It's not so much part of the conversation. I wonder about it. Right now, there's a conversation about whether Luka should be MVP. I haven't done a deep dive on it. I think MVP is just one of these things where it's fun to talk about, but it matters. It matters for what a season is, but it seems like it's a different award from what it was when I was younger.
Absolutely.
Where it was like a roller coaster where you have to be this tall to get on the ride. You need to win this much to be in this conversation. Now it's been baseballified and it's just opened up to everybody, and everybody can bring their statistical argument to it. But yeah, I'm really curious about how good is Luka defensively, or how bad is he defensively? It just seems like it should be part of the conversation. I say that in part because he's fat. He's fat. I don't know what to do with it. It's a very strange situation, and I'm sensitive to it. He has lost his jawline in many respects over the course of the season. It's what happens to me when I'm not taking care of myself, so I notice it, right? And I'm just looking at it. I'm going, you could go one of two ways with this. You can go, this guy's doing is incredible, considering that it doesn't look like he's really trying to take care of himself at all over the course of an NBA season. Or you can go, I can't give MVP to you, bro. You're not trying in a very basic aspect. I don't know how you're doing this with the offensive game that you have. I don't know, but you're not doing everything you should be doing. So I can't give you the award.
So who are the front, Joe? Who are the front runners right now then?
Well, that's precisely what I was going to ask. It feels like, we're watching these end of season games. We see a great game last night with Minnesota and Denver. It feels like, and I could be wrong, but it feels like Denver's going to be hard to beat again. And it feels like Boston is absolutely the class of the East. I was a hopeful Knicks fan. I'm not the world's biggest Julius Randle fan, but I don't think that they really have the puncher's chance that they have without him, whether or not, I'm a fan. That's just a missing piece. It feels like we're like the Celtics and the Nuggets are on a collision course in the finals. Is there a reason not to feel that way about the NBA right now?
I don't want to disappoint you guys, but I really don't engage with it enough to give you a detailed response. One of the reasons I've done what I did, and I'm still a fan of the game, and I talk to executives all the time, but I feel like to really cover the NBA, you need to be watching more than the fans do. You need to be watching multiple games a night. I do not do that anymore. I've got kids. They're awake and present in the evenings. And so I'll catch a game here or there.
Andy with the tired dad nod.
Well, no, I gotta wonder. I get it. I've actually watched less. This is I told Joe this a few weeks ago. This is the least amount of basketball I watched my entire life since I started watching basketball.
Yeah. And that might have something to do with the regular season NBA product. I don't know. But yeah, I've been like, I'll watch the games. I'll watch the Warriors, but I'm not really digging into it. I am aware enough to know that the Bucks on paper looked like they should have been the best team out of the East, but they're just banged up. And in addition to the weirdness that they've had with the whole coaching change, the Celtics are hard to trust because it's like they've got maybe an A- guy, but they don't really have that super duper I'm terrified of you star. And it's hard to trust that. It is. But the Nuggets are very hard to doubt. I find it very hard. Maybe somebody who looks at all of this on a granular level could come up with some sort of explanation for why I should have more consideration for the field, but I just don't feel that way. I just feel it's just sort of casual fan takes. It's just very casual fan take from me. It's the team that just won, think they're going to win again. That's sort of where I'm at when I watch the NBA.
Well, since you brought that up and saying not watching how you used to and when you were covering the game, but also obviously before that, one of the things that we saw on House of Strauss that was the thing that we got to have Ethan on the show to talk about it is Andy is, I have converted Andy over the years, but I am a long time, maybe too long for some people's taste, long time LeBron James is the GOAT advocate. You wrote a long piece a couple weeks ago now on why Michael Jordan is the GOAT, and you laid out your argument. And we wanted to have you on to discuss that. Everybody who listens to our podcast is like, we're sick of this conversation. But to be fair, the majority of the time that we have this conversation, it's just us screaming about LeBron James to go without a counterpoint here. Andy used to be my Michael Jordan foil, but I broke him down.
No, well, hold on. You didn't break me down.
Also, LeBron's career unraveling broke you down.
Well, it was just things, we're Joe was born in 79. I was born in 81. So it's like very similar age. And for me, all my memories, I'm from Cincinnati, right? So all my memories are Jordan. It wasn't, we didn't have a team, but it was just everything was Jordan. And I started to evolve as LeBron's career evolved, so to speak. But your piece I found is a great read. Michael Jordan is the GOAT, and we're not done with the 90s. And I also liked it because we talked about Joe and I have talked a lot about the 90s, right? And I would love your perspective on that as well, Ethan, because it's like, I think a lot of it, which Joe, I think, has pointed out pretty well to me, a lot of it has been, we are products, and I'm sure you'd agree, and I know you write this in your piece, of nostalgia of the time. And it's like, I don't think, and I know you might disagree with this, looking back on it and all the expansion teams, I just don't think the game was as good as we thought it was in the 90s. And then also, Jordan never had, like, LeBron always had the Warriors and those super team foils. It's like Jordan never, like, I don't know. I just, looking back on it, it's like, it's just a different time frame. And I know it's tough to compare eras, but I would just love to hear some of your thoughts on a few of those things.
Yeah, the LeBron one is interesting because those super team foils were created by him doing this unprecedented act of picking his own team. So it's a very complicated thing where he was challenged by the trend that he started, which he didn't really have so much in the 90s because teams were created in this more, perhaps you could call it, organic way. In response to what you're saying, is the game better? The players are more skilled right now. They're more skilled. It's a little bit confounded because when we say more skilled, they're optimized to the rules. They changed the rules after the 1990s. It was a more big man oriented game because you had this thing called illegal defense where a guy on a double team had to run back to his assignment. And that's why you saw this 2-man game where you dump it down low and then you pass it out and you dump it down low and you pass it out. So kind of in the way that the Mongols represent the apotheosis of horse riding, that nobody can do horse riding like they did because there's no real reason to do horse riding that they did. We've had something similar happen with the NBA where the big men of yore, I think in many ways might be more skilled than the big men today. And that's just because they don't need to be skilled in the same way right now. They need to be able to shoot threes and do these other things. So the game has evolved that way, but sometimes we can exaggerate the extent to which the game has changed and we can act as though it's a totally different game. And the argument for Jordan is that he was great. He was the best at the thing the game gives up to gives up to offenses. He was the GOAT off the dribble mid-range shooter. His stats are unbelievable. Not only was he the greatest layup artist of all time, he was a guy who on long twos would hit over half his shots. The defenses today are designed to give you that. That's the thing they give you. And he's crazy efficient at it. So I think this idea that if you dropped him into today's game, he would be at sea, I don't think is the case. He was dominant then. I think he'd be dominant today. And you can reject the whole thing as a crazy hypothetical because we can't literally do that. We can't take him from them, put him in today's game. But I guess what I wonder is this, because
I want to say, first of all, that I agree with you. And I feel like that's part of the conversation that I feel like happens around LeBron and Jordan, which I think is like galactically stupid, is Michael Jordan would be DeMar DeRozan today and LeBron James would be flopping all over. Bill Laimbeer would put LeBron James in a casket and bury him next to OJ. Like it's ludicrous. And I think the Michael Jordan being dominant, you can see that everything that Michael Jordan did in the 90s NBA, he could still do today. He may or may not, and again, we don't do hypotheticals, learn to shoot the three, efficiently or whatever. But to me, it's like the idea that he shows up today and he's just your middle of the road guy is ludicrous. At the same time, the conversation around Jordan and LeBron, I also think that gets muddled is like, this is how much Michael Jordan dominated his time versus this is how much LeBron James. And I understand that. I will never argue that LeBron James dominates the NBA more than Jordan dominated in the 90s. What I would say, though, is that, like you said, the league is so much more skilled. And we have, if you look at the MVPs just from the last 5-6 seasons, how many of them are foreign players? How many of the defensive players of the year are foreign players? It feels like the talent pool is that much greater, where LeBron James is never achieving probably the championships or the personal accolades that Michael Jordan did in the 90s, but also the talent pool he's competing against is so much better.
I guess what I want to know, and it's tricky. I'm not somebody who's a great lawyer for my own perspective. I think that puts me at a disadvantage if I have a conversation like this with, let's say, Nick Wright. But and it's tricky with something like this because I don't want to diminish LeBron James. He's a great player. It's a weird conversation when you're going in and you're diminishing one to elevate the other, because being arguably the second greatest player of all time is an incredible accomplishment, right? But I guess I just don't understand the case for LeBron James. I don't understand it because we typically judge these things on the basis of, we talked about MVPs, and championships. And he's not there. So I just wonder what is the case for him being the greatest player of all time. Because if the case is just that the game evolves and it gets more skilled, then okay, he's the greatest player until next year or next season after he retires. If we're just acceding to this premise that things inevitably get better, right? So I
Well,
don't understand the historical case.
I think the case is the same one as and listen, was born in 1979, so I watched Michael Jordan, but I did not watch a lot that came essentially before Michael Jordan. But you watch the 90s NBA and you find out like the history of basketball wasn't there on the internet for us. It was just what NBA on NBC was telling us as part of a highlight package in the NBA finals. And as a 12-year-old finding out Bill Russell had us 11, and I was like, yeah, but that happened when the game was playing in black and white, and I can see the footage, and it's like, all right, he's got twice as many as Jordan has, but like, I think we all agree he's not better than Michael Jordan. The NBA Finals MVP might be named after him because he would maybe have 11 NBA Finals MVPs, but he's not better than Michael Jordan.
Yeah, the Bill Russell thing is tricky because there was no 3-point line and we didn't really see those games. And it was, you talk about a different era. I mean, that's a completely different era. And we're talking about a center who hit 44% of his shots. Now, we said earlier the defense is half the game, so maybe there's an argument for, well, why do you care about that? I think it would be difficult for me to actually vigorously argue against somebody who said, I consider Bill Russell the greatest player ever. I don't personally believe that. I think that there is a demarcation point between the 3-point line era and everything after it, where that's the modern NBA game. When we get that 3-point line, this is a different game now, and we're judging it according to how it's played. Because before it, that's just something that's almost difficult to relate to and understand. It's a way of playing basketball that I never played growing up, right? Where there's just no 3-point line, but that's how it was done. But yeah, I think it's a tricky one with Bill Russell. I don't understand though the LeBron case. I don't understand what people are going to point to. Is it going to be points total scored?
Well, I
think
think
it's going to be.
Even if I could hop in here, even the titles, it's like, and for someone who covered the Warriors, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I don't think. Well, first of all, it's a team game, as we know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like LeBron went to so many more finals, and it's like Joe and I always use the case. And I think it's an interesting one of like Jordan losing in earlier rounds is somehow accepted better than LeBron taking a 2007 Cavs team to the finals where he gets swept by the Spurs. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a weird argument of like, wait, so had he been Jordan and lost earlier, like Jordan did earlier in his career, that's somehow better, which kind of leaves you, shaking your head. I think to me, that's where I struggle with the Jordan side of it. And I understand that he's 6 for 6. And my thing is like, especially with those Warriors teams, they were always the underdog. I mean, LeBron won 2 games with literally Kyrie out, Love out. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's just call it what it is. My thing always with Jordan, when I really look at it, is like you always had Scotty. You had Dennis for 3 of them. It's like you always had your 1-2. And I know Joe says this, which I think is very interesting. LeBron leaves the Cavs. They go instantly to a lottery pick. Jordan leaves the Bulls for a year. They lose 2 less games. Now they didn't go as far in the playoffs, but like it's to me,
and
like
I'll never admit that Hubert Davis call wasn't a foul. I'll just leave that there.
but do you know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm one of those people. The argument can go either way. I just think you're asking about the case. I think all those things I'm saying are pretty valid cases of it is a team game, especially against those Warriors teams where they lose. What the hell else was LeBron supposed to do?
What's Scottie Pippen's career points per game average? But keep in mind, I think defense is half the game, and I would argue that Scottie Pippen was a very valuable player. But just to anchor us in this conversation, because I think something interesting has happened to the assessment of his career. What's his points per game?
It's 16.1.
Yeah, it's something in that range. Michael Jordan was in large part carrying that offense, especially late in games. Sure. And I think that this has been almost forgotten because you do have that Pippen season where, oh my God, I don't know how they squeezed that many wins out of that roster. Phil Jackson, just an amazing job the season after Jordan retired. I think Horace Grant deserves a lot of credit and was a very underrated contributor.
Absolutely. And then you look
to
at the
those-
next year when he's gone, and
Yes.
and it's the year between Horace and Dennis that you have a loss to the Magic, and in the round 2. And I
Yeah.
know all the Jordan fans in the 17 game season, there's a couple of those 17 game seasons. In fact, if you look at his points per game in the playoffs, where he looks like old Jordan, he scores more points in that playoff season than he does in the next year when they go 72-10.
The one I would point to as far as Jordan's importance and this idea that this was some sort of all-star team, I think it is a remarkable accomplishment by all of them, Scotty included, to have won in the mid-50s. But that famous game where Kukoc hit the winner against the Knicks and Scotty pouted, and it was this black mark on his career, I would recommend people watch the end of that game to get a proper sense, because you get a proper sense of not just Pippen's limitations, but also what they needed Michael Jordan for. It wasn't arbitrary that Phil called up the play for Kukoc. Pippen just couldn't do it. Just couldn't. You watch the end of that game, you realize that he can't do it. He can't create his own shot. And you're watching him and he's just gacking these shots. They're flying off the top of the backboard. And you have a sense
I think
that
the thing about Scottie Pippen, and again, I completely agree with you as a person who has pointed to what did Michael accomplish in terms of championships without Scottie. I think it was the perfect Batman and Robin, because Scottie could come in and do a lot of things, not that Michael couldn't do, but then that Michael didn't have to focus on, and Michael could focus on
valuable
being the guy
winning
who
valuable winning things.
There was a
Incredible
time,
rebounder.
and there was a time that Michael Jordan was the guy on the Bulls who had to guard your best player, and then all of a sudden Scottie comes in and he doesn't have to do that anymore.
I mean, Scottie's defense, incredible. His rebounding, it's almost like a big guy.
Finishing.
His finishing. If he's somebody on your team, we didn't even mention the passing. If he's somebody on your team, he is helping you win. He is helping you win more games in some capacity. He is not a guy you can give the ball to in the fourth quarter and say, carry us home. That's what you saw at the end of that game against the Knicks. And it was bad. It was uncomfortable. I would recommend people watch it. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable how Peter principled he was at that particular moment. So we can focus on they won X amount of games in the regular season, but that team, you're never winning a championship with Scottie Pippen as your best player. That's just not going to happen. That can't happen for you. So I think people have, in a way, to try to make this argument, have kind of elevated Pippen a bit beyond things he could do, to say that Jordan was, I don't know, the icing on top of a 54-win cake. And that's just not, if you experienced it at the time, if you're going back and you're analyzing. And, what's funny about it too, is that Pippen, I might write about this, just what was Scottie Pippen. He's just got one of the strangest careers to assess, because on the one hand, there was a recognition of his value back then. He was getting these awards. He was recognized for it. But
he was an NBA 50 player while he was still playing. He was a dream teamer.
But at the same, and he was a dream teamer, but at the same time, the Bulls were trying to trade him for Sean Kemp, and the fans of Seattle were going to riot because they didn't want to give Sean Kemp for Scottie Pippen. So he has a very strange legacy and value to assess right there. I can tell you from a Knicks perspective, and you could probably relate to this because I grew up rooting for the Knicks. My dad was a Knicks fan. I was not terrified of Scottie Pippen in the way I was terrified of Reggie Miller. If you said Reggie Miller is better than Scottie Pippen, a lot of people would scoff and laugh at you. But I mean, that was back then. You're terrified of Reggie Miller. Scottie, you go, yeah, he's good. He's good. So
weirdly though, when you think as a Knicks fan, when you think back, I completely agree with that statement. But weirdly, when you think back of it,
Charles Smith,
you think of all these moments that Scottie really kind of like essentially ended some seasons, and like,
Duncan on Ewing.
dunking on Ewing, the Charles Smith thing, all like where Scotty really, Reggie, it was almost like he's doing all these things, and then for the most part, we're escaping those series. And the ones where Scotty's getting it over on, you're like, all right, here we go. We get to watch the Bulls again, move on. I think I completely agree with you in the way that, like, I think Scotty is an all-time great, and I think he has been hoisted up to be like, he has carried Michael Jordan in some sense, which is obviously not true. But I think the same thing goes for the LeBron's competition. I think the Tim Duncan Spurs have been diminished. I think one of the great teams that I ever watched, the 2011, I want to do a documentary on the 2011 Mavericks team and what they did in the playoffs and through to the finals, has been it somehow now, like less than 2 decades later, JJ Barea is the star of this 2011 Mavs team that takes down LeBron James because he single-handedly is locking him down.
I mean, okay, you mentioned the Tim Duncan thing. That's another one. I am fascinated by legacies and who gets elevated afterwards. It's almost the opposite of the Klosterman thing of looking at it from what it was like back then. I'm looking at it from what it's like now and comparing it against what it was like back then. Duncan's reputation has been very much diminished, and I would not have expected it, and I don't think it's fair. That's one of those defenses half the games, don't you know, situations. He was the greatest defensive player of his generation. He never won a depoy, but he did all the subtle things, and those Spurs teams were just the best defensive teams, and they squeezed the life out of you like they did to those Cavs in that series that you mentioned. And he's not getting talked about, I think, as nearly the level of player that he was. You would think that being the best team on four teams that won the championship, and I think he, wasn't the best in another where they won a championship, but being the best player would count for a little bit more historically. But he has been downgraded to a certain extent. Hakeem Olajuwon has been elevated, I think, because he has cool highlights. That's another weird career where I can't think of many guys whose reputations are more defined by what they did after age 30 in all of sports than Hakeem, who had one kind of reputation before Jordan retired, and then credit to him, in 2 years completely changed the narrative and how people felt about him, and still do. But maybe Matt Stafford. I'm thinking of a few other guys in sports where after 30 totally changes the conversation about them.
Well, since you seem to be a Tim Duncan appreciator, and I have teased this for a couple of weeks. I'm dropping my 10 NBA players I watched play in order, perhaps with you on or after we release you back into the world today. But I want to ask them, because I feel like LeBron James passing is significantly underrated, in my opinion. Not just being 4th all time in assists, but the pass before the assist, I think is probably where LeBron James' greatness can truly be seen. I almost think what LeBron James is as a passer has been underrated in the way that Tim Duncan's defense has been underrated. If Tim Duncan, with a finals loss to the Heat, with not having 6 championships, if Tim Duncan had played long enough and to be the all-time leading scorer in the NBA, do you think he would have a case for being the greatest player of all time?
It's so hard to know, because they definitely downshifted his load as time went on, which was smart, and they were trendsetters. The Spurs were that way, where suddenly he's playing 33 minutes a night. The thing with Tim Duncan that's a little hard to tease out is that he might be offensively overrated. You look at his scoring, his efficiency was not what you might think that it was. People talked about his fundamentals and the bank shot and everything, and you might think that he's got the kind of offensive efficiency of a Charles Barkley. That's not the case. But it was the defense, which is not captured by statistics, and a lot of this that cannot be captured. I would remember the Warriors would always run motion weak, that set in the Mark Jackson days, and that's a set that the Spurs popularized. And I just have these memories of Duncan almost sleepily bored blowing up the play. He would just, amble over and blow up where the cross screen was about to open up the pass to the big man on the block, and he would blow it up because he knew what teams were doing. He always knew what teams were doing, and he had all kinds of dirty tricks. The Tim Duncan special was always for him to nudge you with his offhand when you're going up to try to finish over or around him, because the referees, when they're looking to call a foul, they're always looking at
the contest.
Yep, that's what they're looking at. So he would always just push guys down a little bit. He had all sorts of tricks, and it's hard to capture that. The only way you can really capture it is just by noticing that statistically the Spurs are dominant defensively year after year after year after year. So I think his case is more on the defensive side than it is on the offensive side for his greatness. And he was a great offensive player as well. He's just not somebody at the level offensively of a Shaq, who was his primary antagonist in some ways, or maybe Kevin Garnett was. I don't know. That's a whole other conversation about his value. But great, it's not a coincidence when you win that much over and over and over again. It's not a coincidence, and so Tim Duncan should probably get more credit historically.
I completely agree, and I think that's the kind of what's at the soul of a Jordan LeBron debate is I just think that, when I remember the 90s, and you could say, if you were looking back, nostalgically, that Michael Jordan didn't have any sort of peers on his level because he was just so much better than everybody else. And I would agree with that. But I also think, I don't think it's a matter of Tim Duncan or Shaq not being good enough to elevate themselves beyond the other one. I just think that you end up being in an era where you have two generational big men, where think about how many, championships Duncan has if Shaq doesn't exist, or vice versa. And then I think the whole conversation is different. And, it's why I always just say, listen, the game's just going to keep getting better, and it's just going to get better. So that's I don't ring count, and I don't whatever. And I think that,
the guy who's really underrated in all these things, and this is shocking that he's become that way, I think when people say that Greg Popovich might be the greatest coach of all time, I don't think that's the case. I mean, Phil Jackson murdered him, just murdered him. And maybe you could say it's a talent thing or what, but that's become a weird one with Phil Jackson, where he won 11 championships and people go, well, the talent. I go,
yeah.
I mean, 11.
I think what's amazing.
Guy knew something.
I agree with you. I think I think that the talent thing is something that people always point to, but what makes Phil's greatness is that he had this talent, but being a manager of egos might be the most important job as an NBA coach. And so he had guys who, in Michael Jordan and in Kobe and in Shaq.
But I think this is subject to what's been called creeping determinism, where when something happens, we go, oh, we expected it to happen afterwards, right? Because we don't like feeling as human beings destabilized. So we create a narrative where I knew that they were going to win, or I knew that they were going to lose. And when Phil Jackson took over that Bulls team, they were not predicted by Vegas to win the championship. I can't remember where they were, if they were 3 or 4, somewhere in there. It wasn't just, people weren't going like, oh my God, the talent this team has, it is inevitable. No, people were saying they're never going to win it. They don't have enough. They're too small. And the same thing was actually true when he took over the Lakers. You would think that Phil taking over the Lakers, people would believe, and they would go, oh my God, he's got Shaq and Kobe. Well, that's based on what Shaq and Kobe eventually did. Right. That we feel that way. They were not the odds-on favorite to win the championship. I believe the Blazers were. So I'm not saying those teams weren't talented, right? I mean, they obviously were. It's just there's this weird thing where you become almost a victim of your own success, where by winning, it changes the assessment of how great the players were. And people might diminish what you did as a coach to actually unleash that team.
Yeah, and I agree. I know, Joe, we've had some debates about that. Popovich first.
Yeah.
Phil Jackson. I'm a firm in Phil Jackson's corner on that, and same way I am with like a Bill Belichick. I'm like, definitely guys have talent, or that's why, I get very annoyed. Was it Brady? Was it Belichick? And I'm like, why can't we just say both?
Yeah,
And
clearly
obviously
was both.
right. And obviously Brady wins one with the Bucks right when he leaves, but it's like, guys, again, it's a team game.
And
I
also,
think-
like we've seen Phil Jackson do it with multiple teams. We've seen Popovich do it with one, but we've seen Popovich do it through a couple of different eras. It's all, I mean, also Popovich's story is still not done. Phil Jackson is done coaching unless something crazy happens. And now you have the Wemby addition to Pop. It's like, can he do this again with another? That would be certainly an interesting, an interesting added layer to the Popovich resume. But Ethan, like I said before, I've been teasing this for weeks. I have something I've been ready to release on our fans. You could stick around for it if you want. I know we've kept you probably longer than expected, so we can also bid you adieu if you've got to go.
I'll stick around for one. I might have to go for lunch, but I at least want to get a sense of what's going to happen. I want to see what's going to happen. So stick around for one and then get on out of here.
So the question has always been, I've talked at length about my ranking of players, but I never put pen to paper and said, I have like where does everybody say, I think this guy is probably top 10 for me. I think this guy's probably top 5. So finally I said, who are the top 10 players that I actually got to witness play in the NBA? My one, we've obviously talked about, is LeBron James. My 2 is Michael Jordan. My 3 is Kareem. Limited amount of time watching Kareem play, but I did watch him play. I think his resume sort of speaks for itself. My 4 is Tim Duncan.
Oh.
So I'm not underrating Tim Duncan, much like most of the world. My 5 is Shaq. My 6, 7, and I put them right next to each other because I was unsure of which direction I was going to go in this, but my 6 is Bird and my 7 is Magic. And my explanation for that is, Bird with the injuries, it feels like we don't get as much of a Bird career as we should have. We don't get as much of a Magic career as we should have either. But to me, and I am a huge Magic Johnson fan as a kid, feels like Bird is a more complete player. 8, 9, very similar because they're often like Bird and Magic. My 8 is KD. My 9 is Steph.
KD up there. Oh my. Oh wow. Okay.
My 8 is KD. My 9 is Steph. My 10, and I am probably the world's foremost Kobe truther in terms of his maybe he's over rated by a lot of people. Kobe is still my 10. He still clears. You could say he was the second best player on 3 of his 5 championships, but he still does achieve 5 championships as one of the, main guys on 2 different championship teams. I would love to, in a way, put Kobe below some of these other guys, but and the truth is, I think a Jokic is probably sniffing around that 10 spot for me. If multiple championships are won, he's certainly got the MVP, certainly got the personal accolades. The sort of list of guys from my time watching the NBA that are just, in this honorable mention are Jokic, Hakeem, Giannis, KG, Barkley, Dirk, Isaiah, Pippen, Luka, AI. Those are guys that were like, you're not in my top 10, but I had to think about you in where you are on this list. So that is my top 10 guys I've watched play in the NBA in my lifetime. Anything that jumps out to you?
I mean, KD is higher than I would have expected. Obviously, he's somebody who on the basis of skill belongs up there. But I think the counter argument would be, has he won a championship or even been right there close as the leader of a team? And you can say the closest he got was pretty close to making the finals against the Warriors in 2016. Very close. But that's something that Dirk certainly did. Another one of these guys where I think that might have been an after 30 championship. So another one of these guys who helped his legacy afterwards. And that's something that Olajuwon did as well. So I think I would find it hard to rank KD above those two guys. And I say that knowing that I had a weird thing with him. I hope that doesn't hope nobody thinks that's what's determining what I'm
Well,
saying here. But
yeah,
yeah,
no,
that's
listen,
but I think most people would say that. I actually think most people, that's the first thing they would identify and argue with on the list is the KD placement.
my counters to those things are, one, he did get to a finals as, I would say, the lead dog on a Thunder
2012.
team.
I should have mentioned
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
A Thunder team.
And it should
2011 or
be said that
2012. Yeah.
the format of those finals might have made it seem not as close as it was, because that was the weird,
Yeah.
2-3-2 thing where you lose, and if they protect home court, you're out in 5. So I should have mentioned that. That was closer than obviously not making the finals.
The stepping on the 3-point line with the Nets, it's like it's a smidge, but it's like the Bucks go on to win the championship. I understand that he didn't get there. And listen, I am not a person who would argue Hakeem's 2 championships are in this no Michael Jordan era.
Yeah.
Like I don't necessarily do that. I think that the Rockets would have been a tough out for the Michael Jordan. I mean, first of all, he's back in 95, so I don't look at it that way. I just think maybe sort of as an overall career, like that was the 2 years that it really felt like Hakeem was in the like he's a real NBA championship contender, and he happens to win them, where it feels like for a lot of years, KD's teams are championship contenders.
Yeah, I mean, crushing Shaq and Penny, that's just, okay, Michael Jordan wasn't there, but that is, it's not bad. That's,
no.
that's
and I would say Hakeem
well
is
done.
I would say that Hakeem is my obvious one that is like, he's the and I have said on our podcast before, I think I have Hakeem in my top 10. And then when I actually had to put it down, I go, I think he's maybe my 11. I just think, in terms of what KD does skill wise. And then of course, you add him to a team in the Warriors, and I hated it, but at the same time, you look at this sort of greatest team in the NBA, he comes and in my opinion was clearly the best player on the team. But I know, and this is a guy who loves Steph and thinks Steph is right there, 8-9,
Yeah, certain players on the team would have agreed with you about that. The way they see the game is a little bit different from how we might see the game. I think that physicality matters, size matters more to the players, and they just don't count it the same way what shorter guys do, because if they're overwhelmed, then that factors more into their assessment than if they're tricked. If Steph does something and they get faked, he gets the shot off, they go, well, I'm gonna prevent that from happening next time, as they've got a lot of confidence. But if a guy is just too tall for you and he's making every shot, then I think they tend to side with that guy is better. I think the assessment has changed since then. This is the theme of the whole podcast, it seems, is assessments changing retrospectively, right? But yeah, back then there were certainly Warriors players who would have told me that they thought KD was better. I wouldn't agree with that assessment, but they're the ones on the team, so it counts for something. I think Steph winning after KD, though, that really flipped that,
for sure,
flipped a lot of those conversations.
Yeah. How do you feel about a sort of modern, an 80s on all-time top 10 that has Kobe Bryant at 10?
It's probably higher than I would place him.
Okay.
It's awkward to talk about because he died tragically. That's the thing with the Kobe thing, where you feel weird.
The opposite of the OJ thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just uncomfortable. It just feels like too soon to start nitpicking.
Well, you want to, I'll just let you know this, Ethan, you want to, awkward. I did a whole YouTube video about how Kobe's like so overrated, and it was planned to drop. And I dropped it.
It was a scheduled YouTube video.
Scheduled. Like, we film it, whatever. We film it, we drop it, and the helicopter crash happens the next day.
Oh my God.
So you
Oh,
can imagine
wow.
what those YouTube comments look like.
So YouTube and on Instagram and everybody's coming at me to take it down, and I'm like, guys, what happened was
This
a
had nothing to do
tragedy.
with it.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with it. And it was
literally a
tragedy.
video called Facts Only, where you gave no opinion whatsoever. You only stated
I'm just listing
statistical
facts. I'm going real nerd stat heavy, and I'm like, and I think he's one of the most overrated players in my opinion. And Joe got me on that train, and I'm just as a guy who lived in LA all these years and watched all the games, I'm just like, never won a series without a big man, blah blah blah, until let's say it's Shaq or Pau Gasol. Anyway, but yeah, people were like, take it down. I'm like, well, I'm not taking this down. And people still to this day are like, dude, you're an asshole. And I'm like, I don't want bad things to happen to people.
I love that you left it up there.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing, because again, this is compartmentalized. It has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with that. It's a different thing, and you don't have to, just because other people are emotional, you don't have to give in. I mean, and yeah, I again, these conversations are awkward sometimes, because you're often saying that somebody who is great is often overrated. You're splitting
Yes.
hairs, right?
Yes.
He is great and overrated. And
Sure, yeah.
and the Kobe thing too, there are aspects of his persona that I love so much. Of he really embraced this kind of character he played of work your ass off relentlessly, wake up at not just 4 a.m., wake up at 3 a.m. And I think people liked that. He kind of
overcoming being the son of an NBA player.
It scratched an itch for people.
Yeah.
People want that sort of motivational, hard ass aesthetic, and he really leaned into that. And that's something that LeBron, I think, has struggled with. He's always trying to be whatever persona he thinks people will like, and he's not sophisticated in the way Kobe was in understanding it. And so when we're talking about Kobe and the way people feel about Kobe, it's really not just on the court stuff. It's the tragedy and also the persona that people emotionally connect to, and it's the massive fan base in Los Angeles.
See, I would counter there. So I have like gotten so deep in this, in Jeff Pearlman's book, 3-Ring Circus, is on the Lakers, 3 rings.
Another great Substacker and guest of the show.
And my thing is, if you read that, I would counter and say, Kobe's just an asshole. Like the whole book, it's fascinating. All his former teammates, and you're just like, dude, there's nothing positive here. Like you branded it Mamba mentality. I'm gonna brand it. You're just a dick.
Yeah, but he branded it successfully.
Yeah,
I mean, we can myth bust it. We can certainly myth
100%.
bust it. But people want a certain mythology, and in a way, he almost packaged what people were drawn to about Jordan, which ironically, Jordan didn't even want to reveal to the public.
Right.
This was a big accident of history in a way that Sam Smith showed everybody what an asshole Michael Jordan was. Michael Jordan is sickened and angry at Sam Smith for doing it. And then the public goes, ooh, we kind of like this.
And
we
they
kind of
say,
are into
well,
this.
how about a whole documentary where I reveal all these
Exactly.
stories?
Exactly. Because it's that weird thing where people want a little bit of the dirty. People want a little bit of that. They want this weird combination of you're smiling and kissing babies, but they also want a little bit of the ruthless Darwinian crucible that athletics actually is.
Yeah.
And if you've got the right mix of it, as Jordan had, man, people really cannot get enough of it. And Kobe understood it, and he tried to sell it, and it worked to a certain extent. It didn't even work to a certain extent. It just worked.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
the persona he created is so incredible. But yeah, I'm inclined to myth bust and show that he was great, but maybe not on the level that his biggest fans think. And there were some guys where they were probably better and more efficient, but you'll get laughed out of the building if you put them on the level of Kobe.
I want to ask you one thing before we all get out of here, as we're now getting to the point where this wrap up show. Based on your reaction and some of the names that you threw out immediately after, do you have, and I'm here for this, by the way, because I think I'm one of his biggest fans. Do you have Dirk Nowitzki over Kobe Bryant?
Yes, I do. Again, this is one of these.
You're welcome on the show anytime. I didn't have to do it, but like, and that's based on the one championship. It's based on defenses half the game. It's based on now. That being said, I I said before, and I mean this, I am trying to put together the 2011 Mavs documentary to talk about how underrated that team is.
I want to make one point before people get mad about it. Nowitzki changed the NBA. When I talked to advanced scouts, they called it Nowitzki, as in when they go through a walkthrough, when you're playing one style of defense versus another style of defense, because nobody had ever been able to score and shoot in the way he did at his size. It completely changed the priors of how defenses operated. And this is something that gets lost to time, perhaps, because other teams, other players learned to shoot in the way that Nowitzki could shoot it, but it was also not just the way that he could shoot it, it was the trajectory that it was shot at that you really could not block. And they built the entire offense around that. And I think for that reason, changing the way NBA basketball is played, I'm not sure you could say that Kobe, even if he's the god to so many guys who became swingmen in the NBA, I don't know if he necessarily changed the sport. I think Nowitzki changed the sport, and maybe I'm being too sentimental about the whole thing, and maybe I shouldn't weigh that so heavily, but that's a huge factor in why I would put Dirk. I would give Dirk the edge there.
Great.
So you love it, don't you?
I mean, I do love
that.
it. The thing is like it's almost like I'm going against myself and somebody. And to be fair, I feel like Ethan is too, because like you get caught up in when I'm finally have to put pen to paper. I'm like, I mean, Kobe's got 5, and even if I say he's got 2 as the best player on his team, which I don't even maybe necessarily believe, but he's got 5. Dirk's got 1. I'm like, can I really Can I do a list like this and then come and tell people that have been listening to 1,000 episodes of my podcast that, as much as I love Dirk and as much as a 2011 Mavs stan as I am, that 5-1 is tough.
I immediately said Dirk, but I want to say I'm not married to that position. It's just you asked me, and it was my immediate knee jerk.
No,
I haven't filled out my form on this and done a deep dive on it. Now I'm thinking, but Kobe was the lead dog on those 2 championships. I don't know. I'm waffling on the whole thing, but that was my immediate knee jerk. What do I think in my soul? And I went Dirk. So
I know you said Dirk right after the list, and I'm like, I know, man, he's right there. I mean, those are the guys. It's really Hakeem, Dirk, and now Jokic coming up that are the guys that are really swimming around that 10 spot, and it's probably Jokic's for the taking with even a single more championship with all the personal accolades. Ethan, thank you so much for being on the show. Everybody that is listening to this is a Substack subscriber of ours, whether it's paid or free. Subscribe to House of Strauss, read his stuff, listen to his stuff. If you've enjoyed this, you're going to enjoy everything that you find over there. We really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. It was great.
Thanks, Ethan. And then next time I didn't even have a chance to bring up your love. I listened to a little of Black Sports Online's titles.
My God, they're headlines.
because we've been laughing about this for years. We've had Robert Littau, the founder, on our show multiple times to talk about the whole thing. But we'll
for your next appearance, you'll play Andy's favorite game. What Black Sports Online headline: real or fake?
Yeah, so I write up fake
Andy
ones,
writes long headlines,
and then Joe has to guess, is it real or fake? And I make it real tricky.
It's so good. All right, I'd love to do that next time.
Yeah, let's do that next time. All right, Ethan, thanks for coming on.
All right. See you guys
later, bud.
Well, that was fun, and he gave us a lot of time. That was a long episode for us these days.
Yeah, I mean, I almost forgot OJ died. Now I remember.
Distracting us from OJ's death for a minute.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's like the stack father, the Substack father. Like Ethan's the guy, just so the dirtballs know, when Substack started talking to us, they pointed to Ethan Substack. It's like, that's the bar.
Yeah.
The House of Strauss. And obviously he's worked as a beat reporter, and he worked for ESPN and The Athletic for all those years. So he's got a lot of great relationships, and it's a great podcast. He obviously writes a lot of great pieces. it's fun to have somebody on, like you said, who thinks Jordan's the GOAT. We can have civilized,
Well, that
fun
was the thing. So,
conversations.
it was like, I feel like you and I, anytime somebody that we hear is a Jordan is a GOAT guy, we're there, like we have guns drawn. And then just his approach, it's like, well, I just don't see the case for it. It's like the way he handled it, he just disarmed us. I was like, well, I'm not going to scream about LeBron to this guy. So not only in the way that he handled the conversation about LeBron and Jordan, sort of set me at ease. And, he's sort of slow dancing with me. And then Dirk over Kobe, he just went to make out on the dance floor. I was like, God damn it. Do I love you? I mean, I couldn't do it, but I'm here for anybody making that, even saying, oh, it's a knee-jerk reaction. I was like, it was a knee-jerk reaction of mine as well, in so many times on talking about this list on the show, but finally revealing it. And I think we can talk about it a little bit more in depth, or talk about your guys' reaction to it if we get a call on future shows. LeBron, MJ, Kareem, Duncan, Shaq, Bird, then Magic, 6-7 right next to each other. KD, then Steph, 8-9 next to each other. Kobe, 10, although I might be putting Dirk there before next episode. Hakeem is floating around, but I really think in the immediate, Jokic is probably jumping into that top 10 pretty quickly and moving Kobe out. And he's probably, if I'm being totally honest, has a chance to move pretty far up the list if his career continues on the path where it might be the KD and Stephs are the 9-10 and the Birds and Magics are the 8-9s and or 7-8s. And then, it could be that it could get to the point where the middle of my list is LeBron, MJ, big, Kareem, Duncan, Shaq, Jokic. It could be that one day. Then you go Bird, Magic, Katie, Steph. But as it lies, I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. Follow Ethan, follow us, do all the things.
Yeah, and we can't get to the calls now, but we had some calls. We had somebody left the call with their 10 most underrated athletes. Somebody had a Dirty Sports not top 10.
Ooh.
Which was like based on our show and funny things like, of that's surrounding the show all the years. So give us a ring, 310-359-8365. That's the hotline. Go see Joe live. Where are you performing?
This weekend, Fresno on Friday, Bakersfield on Saturday with Adam Carolla. April 25th, New York Comedy Club, Stanford, in and around New York from the, let's say ballpark 2021st to May 2nd. So I'll be there 10 days. Come see those shows. Follow me on all the stuff. Thank you guys for all the support. We appreciate it. And if you're new, if you came via House of Strauss, subscribe to the Dirty Sports.
Yeah. And thanks again to Ethan for coming on. And that was a great conversation. And Ethan probably brought the most highbrow Mongolian reference.
Yeah. The Mongolian equestrian technique.
Wow. He going deep on the Dirty Sports. I'm like, this is
not often that I do the side puppet eye meme, and I was like, huh?
Yeah. Good stuff. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. We appreciate all the support, and we will be back on Monday. And I'm looking at episodes, by the way. I'm gonna drop an old hit, the old archive.
And let me add, just right now, I'm leaving immediately now to go have a meeting down in Los Angeles, and then I'm coming back. Stay tuned. There's a chance I might just throw a Hail Mary and go live for Knicks Celtics tonight.
Ooh.
Nothing. I'm not officially announcing, but I am saying set your alerts. I don't know. You get an alert no matter what. So
okay, cool. All right, guys. Thanks for the support. We'll be back on Monday. And as always, stay